Theravāda Buddhism, the true source of awakening. In today's world, humanity is restless. Anxiety spreads across generations. Depression grows despite material abundance, and meaning seems increasingly elusive. People search desperately for solutions in psychology, self-help, technology, consumerism, or spirituality packaged as quick fixes. Yet the hunger never ends. The problem runs deeper than surface stress. It lies at the very root of human existence, in craving, ignorance, and the restless search for satisfaction where it cannot be found. More than 2,500 years ago, the Buddha diagnosed this condition with astonishing clarity. He did not simply offer consolation. He provided a method, a path of practice that leads from ignorance to wisdom, from bondage to freedom. Among the many traditions that developed after his passing, Theravāda Buddhism preserved the earliest and most direct teachings. Rooted in the Pali Canon, the oldest complete record of the Buddha's words, Theravada focuses relentlessly on liberation, nibbana, not ritual or speculation. It insists that awakening is not a myth, not reserved for saints, but a living possibility for anyone willing to walk the path of ethics, meditation, and wisdom. The foundations of Theravada, preserving the Buddha's path. When people today hear the word Buddhism, they often imagine temples filled with incense smoke, golden statues, or monks wrapped in saffron robes walking barefoot with bowls in hand. For some, Buddhism seems like a mystical Eastern philosophy. For others, it appears to be just another religion among many. Yet to truly understand Buddhism, and especially the tradition known as Theravada, we must go back to its beginnings, to a man named Siddhartha Gautama, who became the Buddha, and to the way his teachings were preserved with extraordinary care for over 2.5 millennia. Theravada Buddhism, often translated as the teaching of the elders, is the oldest living form of Buddhism. Unlike later schools that evolved into Mahayana or Vajrayana, Theravada has sought to remain closest to the original words and practices of the Buddha himself. It grounds itself in the Pali Canon, the earliest complete record of the Buddha's teachings, and insists that awakening is not about ritual, speculation, or blind belief, but about direct realization through disciplined practice. This is what makes Theravada so relevant today. It offers a practical, tested path that addresses the fundamental human problem of suffering. To appreciate this, we need to begin with the Buddha's story and the fragile thread of history that preserved his message. The historical Buddha and the preservation of his teachings. Around 2,600 years ago in northern India, Siddhartha Gautama was born into a royal clan of the Shakya people. The legends tell us that he was raised in luxury, shielded from the harsh realities of life. But at age 29, he encountered what are known as the four sights: an old man, a sick man, a corpse, and a wandering renunciant. These jolted him into the recognition that life was impermanent, fragile, and marked by suffering. No amount of wealth or comfort could protect him from aging, illness, or death. Leaving behind his palace, wife, and newborn child, Siddhartha embarked on a spiritual quest. He sought teachers, practiced severe asceticism, and nearly starved himself to death in his search for liberation. But he realized that extreme deprivation was not the path to freedom. Instead, he discovered what he would later call the middle way, a life of discipline, but not self-mortification. Seated beneath a Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya, after deep meditation, Siddhartha experienced the Great Awakening. He saw with clarity the truth of suffering, its causes, and the path to its cessation. He became the Buddha, the Awakened One. The Buddha spent the next 45 years teaching across northern India. Yet he wrote nothing down. His words, spoken in the dialects of his day, were memorized and recited by his disciples. In a culture where oral tradition was highly developed, monks committed thousands of discourses to memory with astonishing precision. The Buddha's teachings were preserved not through books, but through the living voices of a community. When the Buddha passed away around 400 BCE, his disciples gathered at the first council in Ragir. There, his closest attendant, Ananda, recited the discourses, beginning each with the phrase, "Thus have I heard." Another disciple, Upali, recited the monastic rules. These became the foundation of what would later be compiled as the Tipitaka, or three baskets, of the Pali Canon. Over centuries, councils were held to rehearse and preserve these teachings. Around the 1st century BCE in Sri Lanka, the oral tradition was finally committed to writing in Pali. This was a monumental moment in human history. The first complete scripture of Buddhism, preserved in a language close to the Buddha's own, and transmitted with rigorous care. Thus, the Theravada tradition sees itself not as an invention, but as a preservation. It does not claim to add new revelations or speculate about metaphysics beyond what the Buddha taught. Its mission is to protect the original Dhamma, the way the Buddha explained it, and to keep the path to awakening open for all. The Pali Canon, why it matters and how it guides practice. The Pali Canon is vast, consisting of thousands of discourses and rules. But at its heart, it is not meant as philosophy for scholars. It is a practical guide for those who want to end suffering. The canon is divided into 3 baskets: Pitaka, Vinaya Pitaka, the rules and regulations for monastic discipline. These ensure that monks and nuns live simply, ethically, and in harmony with one another. Sutta Pitaka, the discourses of the Buddha, ranging from short sayings to long dialogues. Here we find the 4 Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, the teachings on impermanence and no self, and countless instructions for meditation. Abhidhamma Pitaka, a detailed systematic analysis of the mind and phenomena. This is the most technical part, mapping out the workings of consciousness with extraordinary precision. For Theravada, the Pali Canon is more than scripture. It is a mirror of practice. Each discourse, each rule, is meant to be applied, tested, and realized in one's own life. The Buddha repeatedly urged his disciples, "Ehi passiko, come and see for yourself." The Dhamma is not about blind belief, but about verification through experience. This makes the canon radically different from many religious scriptures. It does not demand faith in a creator God, nor does it threaten eternal punishment. Instead, it presents the human condition as it is, fragile, impermanent, subject to craving, and offers a method to free oneself from this condition. Core doctrines: the 4 Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, impermanence, no self. At the heart of Theravada lie the Buddha's most fundamental insights, which can be summed up in the 4 Noble Truths. These are not dogmas to be accepted, but realities to be understood, practiced, and realized. The truth of suffering, dukkha. Life as ordinarily lived is unsatisfactory. Birth, aging, sickness, and death are painful. Even pleasures are tinged with anxiety, for they do not last. The truth of the cause of suffering, craving, tanha, fueled by ignorance, drives us to cling to what cannot satisfy. We grasp at permanence where there is none, at a self where there is only process. The truth of the cessation of suffering, by letting go of craving, liberation, nibbana, is possible. The fires of greed, hatred, and delusion can be extinguished. The truth of the path. The Noble Eightfold Path is the practical way to realize this freedom. The Noble Eightfold Path can be seen as a map of holistic development: right view and right intention, cultivating wisdom, right speech, right action, right livelihood, cultivating ethics, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration, cultivating mental discipline. Together, they form a training that addresses the whole of life. 2 additional doctrines lie at the core of Theravada: impermanence, anicca. All things are in constant flux. Nothing lasts, and clinging to what changes brings suffering. No self, anatta. There is no fixed eternal I at the center of experience. What we call self is a bundle of processes: body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. Far from being pessimistic, these insights are liberating. By seeing reality clearly, we no longer cling to illusions. We stop grasping for permanence in what is fleeting, and we begin to experience a profound peace. Why Theravada resists dogma and emphasizes direct realization. Unlike many religions, Theravada is not based on belief in a divine authority. The Buddha himself rejected metaphysical speculation. He refused to answer questions about the eternity of the universe, the nature of the self after death, or the existence of a creator God. Why? Because such questions do not lead to liberation. Instead, he urged his followers to see for themselves. In the famous Kalama Sutta, he told the villagers of Kesaputta not to believe something simply because it was tradition, scripture, or taught by a teacher, even by him. Instead, they should test teachings in their own lives. Do they lead to greed, hatred, and delusion, or to compassion, clarity, and wisdom? This is the essence of Theravada. Direct realization. The path is not about speculation, but about practice. Ethical conduct, meditation, insight. Awakening is not a concept, but an experience. This also means Theravada resists dogma. It does not demand worship or blind submission. Monks are not priests mediating between humans and gods. The Buddha is not a savior who takes away sins. Instead, he is a teacher who shows the way. Each person must walk it for themselves. Common misunderstandings about Theravada. Because Theravada is often described as the oldest or the strictest school, many misunderstand it. Let us clear some common misconceptions. Theravada is pessimistic. People hear the teaching on suffering and think Buddhism is gloomy. In truth, Buddhism is realistic. It points out suffering not to depress us, but to free us. Just as a doctor diagnoses illness to prescribe a cure, the Buddha identified the problem to show the way out. Theravada is only for monks. It is true that monastic life is central, but lay followers also practice deeply. In the Pali Canon, many lay disciples reach stages of awakening. Theravada emphasizes that awakening is open to all who sincerely follow the path. Theravada is selfish. Because it speaks of individual liberation, some think Theravada neglects compassion. But compassion, karuna, is central. The path of liberation naturally blossoms into care for all beings. The Buddha constantly emphasized kindness, generosity, and harmlessness. Theravada worships the Buddha as a god. In fact, Theravada sees the Buddha not as a deity, but as a human who realized the highest truth. Devotion in Theravada is an expression of gratitude and inspiration, not worship of a supernatural being. Theravada is outdated in the modern world. On the contrary, because it is practical and experience-based, it fits modern scientific and psychological insights remarkably well. Mindfulness, for example, is now widely studied and applied in medicine and therapy, though Theravada insists it must be rooted in ethics and wisdom, not reduced to stress relief. Etreyu, walking the path. Discipline, meditation, and insight. The Buddha's teachings are not mere philosophy. They are a path, a lived journey of transformation. The Pali Canon does not offer abstract theory, but a training to reshape the heart and mind, step by step, into freedom. Theravada calls this path the Noble Eightfold Path, but it is often summarized into three great trainings: Sila, ethics; Samadhi, concentration; and Panya, wisdom or insight. Together, these form a seamless whole. Ethics steadies life. Concentration steadies the mind. Insight opens the gates of awakening. If part one of this work gave us the foundation, the Buddha's life, the preservation of his words and the essence of his doctrine, then part two is about practice. It is about walking the dusty road that leads from confusion to clarity, from bondage to liberation. And unlike many spiritual promises, the Theravada path is specific, systematic, and testable. Sila ethics as the foundation of freedom. The first step on the path is Sila, often translated as morality, virtue, or ethical conduct. For the Buddha, ethics is not about pleasing a god or obeying commandments. It is about cause and effect. Our actions of body, speech, and mind create conditions. When rooted in greed, hatred, and delusion, they bring suffering. When rooted in generosity, compassion, and wisdom, they bring peace. For laypeople, the basic guideline is the 5 precepts: to refrain from killing living beings, to refrain from stealing, to refrain from sexual misconduct, to refrain from false speech, to refrain from intoxicants that cloud the mind. These are not commandments, but commitments freely undertaken. They are training rules that help us live harmlessly, honestly, and clearly. For monastics, the Vinaya outlines hundreds of rules. They are not about punishment, but about simplicity. By living with few possessions, avoiding harmful behaviors, and dedicating themselves to practice, monks and nuns create conditions for liberation and serve as examples to society. Why is Sila the foundation of freedom? Because without ethical stability, the mind is restless. Guilt, conflict, and harm to others disturb inner peace. A person who cheats, lies, or exploits cannot easily sit still in meditation. Ethics creates the fertile soil in which concentration and insight can grow. The Buddha compared ethics to the earth itself. vast, steady, able to receive all without shaking. Only when life is grounded in virtue can we build the higher trainings of the mind. Samadhi, concentration, and the transformative power of meditation. The second training is samadhi, concentration or collectedness of mind. In our ordinary lives, the mind is scattered, chasing thoughts, desires, worries, and distractions. It is like a wild monkey, leaping from branch to branch. To see reality clearly, we must first calm and steady the mind. The Buddha taught many methods of meditation, but at the core is anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing. Sitting quietly, attending to the breath, the mind becomes still. Thoughts fade. A natural clarity emerges. As concentration deepens, one enters the jhanas, states of profound absorption characterized by rapture, joy, peace, and one-pointedness. In these states, the mind is unified, luminous, pliant. They are not ends in themselves, but powerful tools. Just as a still pond reflects the moon perfectly, a concentrated mind reflects reality without distortion. Samadhi transforms us. A person who cultivates concentration experiences joy, independent of external pleasures. The restless hunger of craving subsides. The mind becomes sharp, steady, and ready for the deepest work. Insight. Vipassana, insight, seeing reality as it truly is. If concentration steadies the mind, Vipassana, insight, liberates it. Insight is not intellectual reasoning. It is direct seeing into the nature of experience. In Vipassana meditation, practitioners observe the changing flow of body and mind. Sensations arise and pass. Thoughts appear and vanish. Emotions swell and dissolve. Nothing endures. Everything is impermanent. Anicca. As one sees impermanence clearly, the illusion of control weakens. We see that clinging brings suffering, dukkha, and we see that what we call self is not a permanent entity, but a stream of changing processes, anatta. This seeing is not abstract philosophy, but lived realization. It changes how one responds to life. Cravings loosen, fear subsides, compassion blossoms, the grip of ego weakens. Vipassana culminates in the direct realization of nibbana, the extinguishing of greed, hatred, and delusion. This is not annihilation, but the cooling of the fires that torment us. It is peace, freedom, awakening. The stages of awakening in Theravada. Theravada describes awakening not as a single leap, but as stages, progressive openings of wisdom. Stream enterer, Sisotapanna, one who has broken the first three fetters, belief in a permanent self, doubt in the Dhamma, and clinging to mere rituals. They are assured of final liberation within 7 lives at most. Once returner, Sakadagami, one who has weakened sensual desire and ill will, destined to return to the human realm only once more. Non-returner, Anagami, one who has eliminated sensual desire and ill will, never to be reborn in the human realm, but to awaken fully in higher realms. Arahant, one who has completely extinguished all fetters, including craving for existence and ignorance. An arahant lives in perfect peace, free from the cycle of rebirth. These stages emphasize that awakening is gradual, attainable, and real. The Buddha insisted that liberation is not for saints of the past, but for anyone who earnestly walks the path. Monastic life and lay practice, 2 wings of the same bird. Theravada gives central place to the Sangha, the community of monks and nuns. They dedicate their lives to meditation, study, and teaching. By living simply and relying on alms, they embody renunciation and serve as inspiration. But lay people are equally vital. They support the monastics materially, and in return they receive teachings and guidance. More importantly, lay people themselves practice, observing precepts, meditating, cultivating wisdom. In the canon, householders like Anathapindika and Visakha are celebrated as great disciples. Many attain stages of awakening while living family lives. Thus, Theravada is not monastic elitism. It is a partnership. Monastics preserve and teach the Dhamma. Lay people sustain the community and embody the path in daily life. Together, they form the fourfold assembly, monks, nuns, laymen, and laywomen, that keeps the Buddha's vision alive. Facing obstacles, doubt, restlessness, craving, and sloth. The path is not easy. The Buddha warned of the 5 hindrances that obstruct meditation and insight. Sensual desire, the pull of pleasures that distract the mind. ill will, anger, resentment, hostility. Sloth and torpor, laziness, dullness, inertia. Restlessness and worry, masun, agitation of the mind. Doubt, uncertainty about the path, oneself, or the teachings. These are the inner enemies of practice. But the Buddha did not tell us to suppress them violently. Instead, he taught skillful means to understand and overcome them. Desire is overcome by seeing impermanence and the unsatisfactory nature of pleasures. Ill will is softened by cultivating loving kindness, metta. Sloth is countered by energy and mindfulness. Restlessness is calmed by concentration. Doubt is resolved by direct experience, testing the teachings in practice. Every meditator knows these struggles. Every practitioner wrestles with laziness, distraction, craving. But by meeting them with patience, mindfulness, and wisdom, they become stepping stones rather than barriers. Theravada for the modern world and awakening today. The Buddha's teaching was spoken more than 2,500 years ago in forests and villages of northern India. Yet its truth remains startlingly relevant. Suffering then was born from greed, hatred, and delusion. Today, suffering wears new clothes. Anxiety, consumerism, alienation, ecological collapse, and the dizzying swirl of digital distraction. The forms have changed, but the roots are the same. Theravāda Buddhism, with its unbroken lineage of practice and its emphasis on direct realization, offers not just consolation, but transformation. It is not an escape from modernity, but a lens through which to see its crises clearly and a path to move beyond them. Applying Theravada wisdom to anxiety, consumerism, and digital distraction. Modern life is marked by speed and restlessness. We are surrounded by information, advertisements, social media feeds, and consumer demands. Instead of peace, this overload often produces anxiety, the gnawing sense that something is missing, that we are behind, that life is slipping away. Theravada diagnoses this problem with precision. Craving. The mind craves stimulation, validation, possessions, experiences. Like drinking salt water, the more we consume, the thirstier we become. The smartphone becomes a new kind of rosary, beads of endless scrolling. Shopping malls become temples of desire. Anxiety is simply the fruit of this restless hunger. The solution is not withdrawal into cynicism or denial, but the eightfold path. Mindfulness helps us pause in the storm of digital distraction, returning to the breath, the body, the present moment. Ethical restraint helps us resist consumerist manipulation, asking, do I really need this, or is this craving pulling me? Concentration steadies a scattered mind, giving space from the endless push of notifications. A young professional overwhelmed by work emails can practice mindfulness of breathing for 5 minutes before opening the inbox, calming the surge of anxiety. A parent raising children in a consumer-driven culture can model generosity, teaching joy in sharing rather than endless acquisition. Small practices rooted in Theravada wisdom become antidotes to modern poisons. Theravada and science, mindfulness, neuroscience, and evidence-based practice. In recent decades, science has begun to catch up with what the Buddha taught. Neuroscience shows that meditation reshapes the brain, strengthening regions linked to attention, compassion, and emotional regulation, while quieting the circuits of fear and stress. Psychology confirms that mindfulness reduces anxiety, depression, and chronic pain. Programs like mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, inspired by Theravada Vipassana practice, have brought meditation into hospitals, schools, and even corporations. This shows that the Dhamma is not superstition, but a practical science of the mind. Yet there is a caution. While science affirms the benefits of mindfulness, Theravada reminds us of the deeper purpose: liberation, not just stress relief. A soldier can use mindfulness to shoot more calmly, or a corporation can use it to boost productivity. This is not awakening, but distortion. True Theravada practice integrates ethics, concentration, and wisdom. Mindfulness without sila risks becoming a tool for ego. Neuroscience confirms the power of meditation, but only the full path leads to freedom from greed, hatred, and delusion. The meeting of Theravada and science is promising, but we must not reduce awakening to mere technique. How Theravada informs relationships, compassion, and social ethics. Modern life often fractures relationships. Busyness, self-interest, and digital distraction erode intimacy. Families eat together while scrolling on phones. Communities splinter into ideological camps. Loneliness spreads like an epidemic. Theravada offers medicine through metta, loving kindness, karuna, compassion, mudita, empathetic joy, and upekkha, equanimity. These four immeasurables guide relationships with warmth and balance. A spouse practices metta by listening deeply rather than reacting with anger. A friend practices karuna by supporting another in grief without trying to fix everything. A colleague practices mudita by rejoicing in another's success without envy. A parent practices upekkha by loving without clinging, allowing children to grow. Theravada also guides social ethics. It teaches that true happiness cannot be built on exploitation. A society driven by greed will breed inequality and unrest. Compassion must extend beyond personal relationships into systems, economics, justice, healthcare. When governments or corporations exploit workers, the Dhamma calls for fairness and generosity. When prejudice divides communities, the Dhamma calls for recognition of shared humanity. Social transformation, in the Theravada view, must arise from inner transformation. Justice without hatred, peace without passivity. Theravada and ecology, interdependence and care for the earth. The ecological crisis is the greatest challenge of our century. Climate change, deforestation, extinction, pollution, all are consequences of greed and ignorance. Theravada offers a framework for ecological care. The doctrine of dependent origination shows that nothing exists in isolation. Just as our actions shape our minds, human exploitation of nature disrupts the whole web of life. To harm forests, rivers, or animals is to harm ourselves. Monastic traditions in Southeast Asia have long embodied ecological mindfulness. Forest monks live with minimal possessions, often in huts or caves, dependent on the natural environment. In Thailand and Cambodia, monks have even ordained trees by wrapping them in robes to protect forests from logging. For laypeople, Theravada encourages simple living, generosity, and non-harming. Consuming less, recycling, protecting animals, planting trees. These are modern expressions of the first precept in the virtue of compassion. Theravada reminds us that the earth is not a commodity, but a field of practice. Every step on the ground, every breath of air is an interdependent gift. To live with mindfulness is to live in gratitude for the planet. Avoiding the commercialization of mindfulness in Buddhism light. In the West, mindfulness has become a billion-dollar industry. Apps, retreats, workshops, and corporate programs promise calm and focus. But often this is Buddhism without the Buddha, stripped of ethics, wisdom, and the aim of liberation. This commercialization risks reducing Theravada practice to self-help or productivity hacks. It becomes a way to cope with stress while leaving untouched the deeper causes: greed, exploitation, systemic injustice. Authentic Theravada insists that mindfulness is inseparable from the Eightfold Path. To practice awareness while ignoring ethics is like polishing the surface of a mirror while leaving it covered in dust. The challenge for modern practitioners is to benefit from the accessibility of mindfulness while keeping its roots alive. True practice requires honesty, restraint, compassion, and the courage to face suffering. It is not easy, it is not marketable, but it is liberating. A vision for global awakening through Theravada principles. What would a world shaped by Theravada look like? Individuals would live with mindfulness, consuming less, acting with compassion, free from endless craving. Families would embody loving kindness, raising children with balance rather than indulgence. Communities would practice generosity, ensuring no one is left behind. Nations would ground policy in ethics, seeking justice without exploitation. Humanity as a whole would rediscover harmony with the earth, living as stewards rather than conquerors. This is not utopia. It is the natural flowering of the Dhamma when practiced sincerely. The Buddha did not promise a perfect world, but showed how individuals and societies can move toward peace. Theravada, as the oldest living tradition of Buddhism, offers a roadmap. It is both rigorous and compassionate, both rational and transcendent. In an age of uncertainty, it is not nostalgia for the past, but guidance for the future. The global awakening the world needs will not come from technology alone, nor from politics, nor from consumer abundance. It will come from hearts and minds transformed. If even a fraction of humanity practice the path, ethics, concentration, and wisdom, The ripple effect would be vast.